the
Wow.
creator of the Super League and Vintage Super League 3 champion, and you're moving on, sir.
Thank you. Wow, that feels good. I guess you know how this feels. You got to win the first one of these. Feels pretty awesome. Not gonna lie.
So talk about what you experienced there. Well, first of all, what are you feeling? Like what
I'm
was
just this rush of wow. I mean, I kind of can't believe that I won. I mean, to beat Eric two straight, his draws cooperated with me more than they cooperated with him for sure. I mean, I ran pretty good. I mean, stitching together the Pyromancer on the last turn, it was just like everything just kept coming up perfect and coming up perfect. I'm like, I've got to slog through Jace and Mentor, and got my notes where I'm like, okay, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen. And I about halfway through that last game, I didn't think I was gonna win it, but ran pretty hot there at the end.
and Cabal Therapy was that your MVP or was it Lightning Bolt?
I mean, Lightning Bolt earned its spot in the deck for sure. Lightning Bolt came up clutch a couple of times. That was nice. I mean, part of the reason I left them in after sideboarding was to kill a Jace. So I mean, that kind of, I mean, obviously I'm
Right.
not down to card them, but I mean, it's Jace. You have to kill Jace, and it can kill a factory in a pinch. So yeah, I felt pretty good about just having 2-3 Lightning Bolts in my deck.
Yeah. So did you sideboard out? What did you sideboard out for the Dreadonites? And did you sideboard in Dreadonite the last match?
In the last match, I only sideboarded in the one because it just didn't feel like the game was revolving around Mentor. So I brought in one of the two.
What,
I remember to bring in the Mountain in the second match. God, I forgot to bring in the Mountain in the first match. That was embarrassing. And then it was like it's exactly the Wasteland. I should go basic, and I just can't because I'm an idiot. Pyroblast is the only actually good card. Like Mountain's good. I brought in Pyroblast, Mountain, and then in the second game I brought in one Dreadonite. So I don't know what you think.
what did you sideboard out? What did you sideboard
I
out?
Force of Wills. I caught one or two Force of Wills in this matchup because he's not
Wow.
combo me out. It's not like he's going to go, blah, you must have a counterspell right now or the game is over. It's much more of a grindy match, right? It's attrition based. I want to be snapcastering and Cabal Therapying, and I just want to play this incremental card advantage game. So I don't want to pitch two cards to counter one thing. So I shaved two Force of Wills when I had the two Dreadonites. I shaved one Force of Will when I had the one Dreadonite. I took out Dak. Dak just didn't feel like he was super relevant to the matchup. I mean, he's good if I can stick him, but it just felt like I wanted to be a little leaner than that. And I took out one Lightning Bolt, so I had two Lightning Bolts.
One more quick question for you. What do you think of that Cabal Therapy at the beginning of the last game? Well, I mean, how do you even decide what to take there? What was your thought process?
Which part?
At the beginning of the last game, I think you saw Brainstorm, Spell Pierce. It might have been the first game in the second match, but you Cabal Therapied on turn one.
Yeah.
I think you probed and you saw like 4 legitimate targets there.
Oh yeah.
And you decided to take 4. Wondering what you thought of that and what you were thinking.
I thought that his draw. So he was short colored mana, right? He couldn't actually really play the game, and so I felt like if he doesn't draw into colored mana, the only card that even interacts with me right now is the Force of Will. That was my thinking.
Right.
Like I just told you, I don't think Force of Will is great in the matchup. So part of me wanted to leave the Force of Will in his hand so he can 2-for-1 himself. But then I'm like, no, I really want to stick a Pyromancer while he's kind of scuffling for colored mana sources. So I felt like it was the only card that could interact with me on the very next turn. Cruz was the other card. Did I miss a turn where I was supposed to therapy Cruz?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I just missed a turn where I could therapy Cruz, right? It occurred to me the next turn. I'm like, why? Yeah, I mean, it worked out, but I mean, that was no subtle plan. There was a 1-turn window where I was supposed to therapy the Cruz, and I just missed it.
It's interesting. Also, were you afraid of Supreme Verdict at any point?
I mean, I was aware that it existed, but he was having such colored mana problems that I'm like, I mean, what am I going to do? Like, I cannot commit a second Pyromancer to the board. The game where I committed the second Pyromancer to the board, he had so little mana that it felt like he couldn't possibly stitch together the 4 mana he needed to get to Supreme Verdict. And then, I mean, you're going to play one Pyromancer and then just go as wide as you can. And I was aware of it. I mean, did he bring them in? He probably brought them in.
We didn't see any, but we were speculating how many he might have brought in. But it's interesting that therapy deals with that quite nicely.
True.
That's the only card that really can.
Yeah, I think he may have been the better anti-shops deck between the two of us, but I think I had the advantage heads up. I mean, I think he doesn't want to play against Pyromancer Cabal Therapy. That's kind of a nightmare for his deck, I think. I mean, it feels like those games played out. Sure, he was mana screwed, especially, I mean, in the first match, he just had a mana screw and a mana flood. Average those 2 draws out, it's probably a totally different game. But I feel like my deck presents him with threats quickly enough that I can disrupt him before he can kind of ice the game with a standstill.
Right.
I don't know. What did you guys think of the matchup?
No, we didn't really discuss the matchup per se, but I totally agree with you. I think you're able to, the combination of cards you have, especially with Snapcaster Mage,
Yeah.
which he has to answer one for one, and you're always getting value out of it. It's you have a nice advantage, and if he can't stop your tempo play, he's going to get crushed. So he has a lot of good defensive tactics. I mean, balance is no small thing, right? I mean, it's but he's mostly one for oneing you, and standstill. He kept a really interesting hand in the first match where he had Strip Mine, Wasteland, 4 blue spells, but no blue mana.
Yep.
If he had seen, you just capitalized just as your deck would. But if he had seen that Sapphire a couple turns earlier, it would have been a match. Lots of interesting plays. I mean, we were talking about Cabal Therapy a lot. That's got to be one of the most skill-intensive cards in the entire game of Magic.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's
just a fun card to play with. I didn't play it perfectly. Like I said, I missed a turn here, and last week I made a wrong call last week. I was one of those where I was going back listening to Luis do the commentary, and it was like last week I had all those pulverized games that I was really proud of, and listening to that, people were like, "What is he doing? What is he doing?" Oh wow, this works out great. I'm like, yeah, pulverized is awesome. But there was a Cabal Therapy where I had a choice between a Gush and a Force of Will, and I should have named Gush, and I named Force of Will, and card's super skill intensive, and I'm not perfect, but
all the black cards introduced a lot of decision trees. At one point, you had the choice of whether to flashback to therapy, and hit either the Spell Pierce or I think the Brainstorm, and you also had Demonic Tutor that turn.
Yep.
And so we were rampantly speculating what you were going to Demonic Tutor for.
What did you guys expect me to tutor for?
Well, one of the plays that I came up with was Therapy, the Spell Pierce, and DT for Misstep, and hit the Brainstorm because he invests the blue mana in the Brainstorm. You misstep it, you generate a token, and I think he's at 1 life the next turn.
Yeah, well, a Lightning Bolt was on my short list, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, the Lightning Bolt was absolutely on the short list because I felt like, I mean, it was one of those where the way his mana worked out, I thought he was going to play Crucible. He could play Crucible and leave up enough mana to activate the Factory. But if he does that, if he activates the Factory, then he can't Spell Pierce. So maybe he doesn't play Crucible, but I felt like he couldn't do everything he wanted to do. And if I can Alpha Strike him and just bolt him, like if I'd had 1 more mana to pay for Spell Pierce, Lightning Bolt would have been an easy get. I almost got it anyway, but I just figured like this Gush, it makes a token, so it's like a third of a Lightning Bolt anyway if I just Alpha Strike. And
Demonic Tutor for Gush is rarely going to be just a horrible play, right? I mean, it's just Gush is just so good. The interesting thing was, Time Walk is also just game over, but he has.
Oh, it was on the list.
Yeah.
The Spell Pierce screws it up though, but like I felt like if I could resolve a Time Walk, you could just resolve a Lightning Bolt and just brain.
Right. No, that makes sense. I loved your call there, but we were definitely at one point. Chris suggested get a Force of Will because to turn the DAC on, but I was like, I don't know, Chris. I hear what you're saying, but no, I really liked your play there. Tempo, put your foot on the pedal while you've got the tempo advantage. Yeah. He has really limited number of outs there. The Balance or the Supreme Verdict at that point. Actually, I don't think Supreme Verdict is an out because that was game.
He didn't have the mana. Balance would have been an out. I may not have been thinking I wasn't actually thinking about Balance, but that's his best draw.
Yeah, he actually had 1 more mana in his hand. Wait, Supreme Verdict costs blue, white 1.
Yeah, it's 3 colored mana, which he.
Okay, no, you're right. He only.
Blue,
yeah,
white.
he only had 2. He had 2 color because he had the fetch land in his hand.
Yeah.
But also these games that you played today, you really string together these probes and these these therapies. Just at one point, I think you probed into a probe into a land or something. Might have even been.
I certainly went fishing for that. I mean, I was preordaining and leaving probe on top because I'd rather pay 2 life and generate a 1/1 and then draw the next card, right? Then push it with preordain. So that was I did that a couple of times, I think.
There was another interesting play that Chris raised was I think the beginning of the last game when your hand had 2 pyromancers and you had 3 blue spells. There was a question as to whether you should have played the probe there because you would have been able.
Right. Yeah, no, that was definitely a judgment call. I was honestly the play that I was most worried about was mana drain into Jace.
Right.
And it turns out that's exactly the hand that he had.
That's what he had. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it turns out I could counter that. Like, he didn't have a Force Will to defend it. Like, he could mana drain, but then he couldn't force back. I just wanted to know what was up. I was just like, I'm willing to throw away a 1/1 token in order to see what's up. Because if he has a Force of Will in that hand, I'm not going to play into mana drain Jace with Force of Will
Right.
back up. I'm just.
Well, he ended up plowing. He ended up having force and plow, and just
Yeah.
the way your hand was set up, you would have been able to pitch the probe and then misstep the plow, so you'd have had tremendous tempo advantage. Not saying that your line was.
I mean, I had another Pyromancer though. Like the plow
Yeah.
wasn't that big a deal.
Right. What's interesting though is he had so many different lines. I mean, he could have played. He instead of playing the plow, he could have played mentor there, and then next turn plowed. Obviously, he set up.
Well, but I bolt the Mentor. Like every turn that game, I had the ability to lightning bolt and kill Mentor.
Of course, but he doesn't necessarily know that you have Volt there.
Sure. But from my perspective, the Mentor was not that scary until we got to the very end.
Right. The other thing is, were you surprised when he decided to brainstorm instead of bounce your Pyromancer?
No, that's what I expected him to do.
All three of those Jace activations, I think, would have been, legitimate in some fashion.
Right. Yeah, no. If he Fate Seals, he plays around my Lightning Bolt, right?
Right. Yeah, and you have to attack with all 3 tokens to take out the Jace. Really interesting match. I think you're going to have a lot of fun going back and watching those matches and seeing all your different options. Your deck. I think if there's a title for it, it's called the Decision Tree.
Good times. Yeah, no. If you want to make decisions, play decision intensive vintage. This is definitely the one. Sometimes they go turn 1 Chalice on 0, Chalice on 1, turn 2 Chalice on 3. God, that was the most frustrating game. Piccola did that to me in game 1. Were you watching that one?
Yeah, I caught some of it. That was incredible. He could have played turn 1 Chalice at 1 and Lodestone Golem, but he decided not to do that, I think.
Yeah, no, he has to play Chalice 1, but I think Chalice 0 might be better there than Golem. Because he can play Golem. You're right. He went turn 2 Golem and then turn 3 Chalice on 3. Just before I could play my Dack Faden.
Right. he had 2
Chalice 0, I'm like, okay, it's annoying, but it's card for card, but I hate that card. The Chalice 1
he had Mox, Soul Ring, and Shop, so he could have played Chalice for 1 and Golem.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's better. I don't know. The way he played the game worked out beautifully. Like the fact that he could Chalice 3 to ice my Dack Faden. I actually thought I was going to win that game. There's no resistor. There's just this beautiful, delicious Wormcoil engine sitting out there that I can steal on turn 3. It's like, Chalice, I could beat Chalice 0, Chalice 1. This is going to be a great story. The Chalice 3 comes down, and it was on the stack for a little while because I was taking a lap of the house. It's only one game. Calm down. Definitely like laugh out loud / shaking my fists at the world. Came back and won the last 2. So it worked out.
Wow. It's sad that another season is in the books. It was too short, but it was very entertaining.
Yeah, it was too short. I do want to let people know, by the way, that the plan right now for Vintage Super League specifically is to come back as soon as the Super League Championships is over. So we announced the Standard Super League crew that's going to be taking over Tuesday nights in a couple of weeks. We've got 3 of our Vintage guys already queued for the Super League Championships, which is going to be happening. So that's October, November, basically right after Battle for Zendikar comes out. We'll be playing that Super League Championships. And then as soon as it's done, then the real format comes back. Am I allowed to say that, the real format?
You're allowed to say that here. You're allowed to say that here.
All right.
You won't get any quarrel with me. But you're not doing full-time commentary duty because you're going to be playing in this. So I'm sure folks are going to be looking forward to seeing what you come up with, and I'm looking forward as well.
Yeah, that standard should be awesome. I guess I'll probably see you at Eternal Weekend here in a couple of weeks, right?
Definitely. You're going to be playing, competing, or casting?
I'm doing commentary at Eternal Weekend. So yeah, I'm doing the Legacy Champs and the Vintage Champs, and then I'll do some playing on Friday. We may
all right.
We may have some 93, 94 Magic to play at a certain off-site side event on Friday. I've been building some decks for that too.
Super excited for that. Can't wait to play you with that.
So I guess that does bring it to a wrap. It's an abbreviated season of Vintage. We hope to go back to the full 9 weeks of regular season into a playoffs. There's kind of a nice spot where once we get past the Super League Championships, we can take over the end of November, all of December, all of January is probably the next time for VSL Season 4. So that is the plan for VSL.
This was nice actually because it gave people, with no relegation, it gave people an opportunity to play some different decks and experiment. And I think we had a really nice mixture this time. And I'm really
I also really like the format. I mean, not that I like the 3 weeks part of it, but
right.
I like this sort of dramatic narrative of the double elimination, right? The 3 weeks of double elim felt pretty good to me in terms of, okay, everybody plays, nobody's eliminated, and you start knocking people out, then you play the finals. That felt like a pretty good way to spend 3 weeks. I don't know. I'm certainly curious if anybody out there in the chat has any feedback. Given that we only kind of had the channel for 3 weeks, I felt really good about the double elim.
Well, I've told you this in private, but I might as well say it now that I think, the format that you came up with for the Vintage Super League, the season 1, was just genius. I mean, it worked out so well, that there's the infinite permutations and variety of options out of all of them. The format you came up with just worked perfect. But, there's this I think gives you a lot to consider and more options to play with down the line.
I suspect what we'll do is we'll do the double elim 3 week thing for the play-in. Because we still got to figure out our 10th player, right? We got some guys that are eager to try to break into the league. So maybe let them play for 3 weeks, get the whole double elim, have a loss to give, and then we come back and do the round robin. That's
our mantra here has always been more magic.
Magic. Love it. Yeah. So that's going to do it for Vintage Super League. Come back. We're off next week for the Pro Tour. We're off 1 week after that. But after the 2 off weeks, we'll be back with Standard Super League Season 2. Hopefully you guys have seen the crew. If not, I've already posted it to my Twitter account. I may have had some downtime during the Martell match and managed to get that up. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, and we'll be back